Hey, how's it going guys, Chris here with my first weapon guide from Battlefield 1's In the Name of the Tsar DLC. And why not start off with a classic, the Russian Mosin-Nagant M91. One of the most popular weapons used on the Eastern Front, and one of the most widely dispersed and successful military rifles of all time. The 1891 Mosin-Nagant, aka the Three-Line Rifle Model 1891, is a bolt-action internal magazine-fed weapon which can hold up to 5 rounds at a time via stripper clips. These said rounds would be the 7.62 Russian, a rimmed rifle cartridge designed specifically for the Mosin-Nagant and introduced in the same year of 1891, though the cartridge is still in use today by some modern Russian weapons such as the Dragunov sniper rifle and the PKM machine gun. The Mosin-Nagant used a turn bolt handle influenced by the French Lebel rifle, and just like many of the other military infantry rifles around at the time, the gun was a pretty long and often awkward thing to wield around. It was about 1.3 meters in length, or 51 inches, and that's not including the bayonet, which would have increased this size even further. And because it was a Soviet military policy to keep the bayonet fixed at all times, as you could imagine, this would have made the gun a bit of a nightmare to carry in the trenches, especially with troops not even being issued a sheath to cover the blade. The weapon was designed to be easy to manufacture, yet hard wearing and capable of standing strong in harsh environments, which it certainly could. And despite being a fairly simple gun in the way it was made and functioned, it was a very dependable rifle, which led it to become an icon of Russian small arms. So in the late 1870s, the Russians were at war with the Ottoman Empire. In the end, the Russian-led coalition won the war, but they also suffered a huge amount of casualties and deaths as a result. It became apparent that Russia really needed to upgrade their weapons to keep up with the competition, as the Russians were using the obsolete single-shot Badam rifles, whereas the Ottomans on the other hand were using Winchester lever-action repeating rifles with a much quicker rate of fire. Over the next few years, lots of new guns were put up for testing, but it wasn't until 1889 when Tsar Nicholas ordered for a new rifle to be developed, which led to 3 different designs being put forward. Captain Sergei Mosin's 30 caliber rifle, Belgian designer Leon Nagant's 35 caliber rifle, and Captain Zinoviev's rifle, another 30 caliber weapon, was also submitted too. When the trials concluded in 1891, it was decided that elements from both the Mosin and the Nagant rifles would be incorporated into the new service weapon, hence why it's often called the Mosin-Nagant. And from the year it was first produced, the rifle saw service in a lot of early conflicts. But by the time World War I came along, there just weren't enough Mosins around to arm the whole of the Russian army. Along with 3 Russian factories and 1 French gunmaker, 2 American companies, Remington and Westinghouse, were both also contracted to manufacture the M91 during the Great War. But with the onset of the 1917 revolution, which essentially removed Russia from the war, this resulted in very few US copies actually reaching Russian soil during World War I. And so the ones left over in the States were used for training, and others were issued to American and British forces and used at a later date during the Civil War in northern Russia. So before I get onto all the in-game stats and weapon details, I'm going to briefly run over how to get hold of the Mosin-Nagant M91 first. You're going to need to own the In the Name of the Tsar DLC, and then you'll have access to the assignments to unlock both Mosin-Nagant variants. The infantry variant can be a lot like getting 3 headshots in a round with the SMLE MKIII Infantry, along with performing 20 kills with the Mars automatic pistol. Whereas the Marksman variant, on the other hand, can be unlocked by racking up 50 kills with the Gewehr 98 Marksman, along with getting 15 kills with the tripwire bomb HE. So anyway, it's time to see how the Mosin-Nagant M91 ticks by delving into those stats. And straight off the bat, I can safely say that the gun is extremely similar to the Russian 1895 for its ballistics and the way it functions in Battlefield 1, to the point where statistically, it's actually almost the same weapon, probably down to it firing the same cartridge. One factor that the Mosin shares with the Russian 1895 is the weapon's power, as it's going to deal 80 damage up to the range of 40 meters, and from here, it'll start to increase up to the weapon's 1-hit kill sweet spot zone, which begins at 60 meters. Between the ranges of 60 to 100 meters, you're going to be dishing out the gun's maximum damage of 100. Though beyond the sweet spot range, the damage will begin to decline, eventually reaching 80 again at 140 meters. Because the maximum damage doesn't start till 60 meters, This means that it's got a further sweet spot than the SMLE MKIII, along with the Martini-Henry, Lebel 1886, and the Vitelli rifle. So despite having no long-range optics, the Mosin can perform pretty well against opponents just beyond those medium distances. With a total sweet spot span of 40 meters, this is kind of average, as it's not quite as large as the M1903 or the Gewehr 98's one-hit kill zones, though it's slightly more than some of the other mid-range rifles, such as the SMLE MKIII and the Lebel 1886. Just like with the other rifles, a headshot's going to net you a swift kill instantly at any distance, by bumping that damage up to 144 minimum with that 1.8 times multiplier. So aiming for the noggin is always going to be the most efficient way to bring down your target when engaging. Otherwise, outside that 60 to 100 meter sweet spot zone, unless your enemy has already been weakened, it's going to take 2 bullets to put them out of action. Firing at a rate of 55 RPM, the Mosin-Nagant M91 isn't far off the Russian 1895, which fires a teeny bit faster at 56 RPM, so you're probably not really going to notice a huge difference between the two. 55 RPM is a fairly average sort of fire rate regarding the scout weapons, sitting between some of the slower guns like the Vitelli rifle and the faster ones like the Gewehr M95. So with the majority of scout rifles in Battlefield 1 firing at speeds between 50 to 56 RPM, the Mosin is another gun to join that bunch. One specific factor which is a lot more important to know when it comes to the scout rifles is the weapon's muzzle velocity, which is basically the speed of your bullets as they whiz through the air. In the Mosin-Nagant's case, each 7.62 Russian round is going to travel at 820 meters per second, which unsurprisingly is the same as the Russian 1895's bullets. This speed is definitely at the higher end of the spectrum, as it also mirrors the M1903's velocity, which requires a quicker bullet speed to cater for its role as being a longer range sniper rifle. It's not quite as snappy as the Gewehr 98's 880 meters per second muzzle velocity, but it's still pretty fast anyway, and so you won't really need to lead moving targets very much as you're lining up that perfect shot, which should make the gun feel quite reliable and consistent to use. Just like with pretty much all of the other scout rifles, apart from the Martini-Henry and a few of those unique weapon variants, the Mosin-Nagant has a vertical recoil figure of 2 and a horizontal recoil figure of 1, so it's going to have the same sort of kick as the others. This also applies to the Mosin spread values too, as it's not going to have any spread at all whilst aiming down sights, but only if you're standing still. If you're moving around whilst aiming, then that spread's going to increase, and it's highly likely that your bullet will stray off target as you open fire, even if you line that shot up perfectly. So just like with the other rifles, it's always very important to stand still when taking on an enemy. The infantry variant of the Mosin-Nagant is going to recover 50% quicker from recoil over the Marksman, and because it doesn't have any optics, you'll be able to remain in ADS while cycling the bolts in between shots. This might make it seem easier to remain on target to land follow-up shots one after the other, and because you'll be using iron sights with the infantry, it might make the gun feel even more reliable at times due to you not having to lead targets quite as much with that lower magnification. Though with that said, the Marksman variant is going to provide you with a mid-range sight, making it easier to acquire targets further away and allow you to accurately place where you want your bullets to go. The Marksman sight isn't going to emit any scope glare, so you won't have to worry about it transmitting your position to the enemy team, and although it doesn't add any statistical benefits, the scope should add a bit of extra precision, making lining up those headshots at longer ranges a little bit easier to do with that added zoom. Now, the Mosin-Nagant M91 can hold up to 5 rounds at a time, just like quite a lot of the other scout rifles, which means that if you've got a steady aim, it's fully capable of killing a few players per reload. Though the Mosin's internal magazine isn't quite as generous as the likes of the SMLE MKIII or the Lebel 1886, which increases 5 round capacity even further, allowing for more kills or, albeit, missed shots. It's no big surprise that this is yet another aspect which is shared with the Russian 1895 rifle, which can also hold up to 5 cartridges too via stripper clips, though when it comes to reloading, the Mosin-Nagant is a very unique rifle. First of all, you'll be able to perform a full reload in just about 3.1 seconds, which, when compared with the other 5-shot rifles, is pretty quick. almost shaving a whole second off the Russian 1895's full reload. But this is where it starts to get interesting, as when it comes to the tactical reloads, the Mosin naturally goes through a series of unique animations depending on how many bullets are left over in the gun. If you choose to reload one single round back into the weapon with 4 already present, then it's going to take about 3 seconds, which isn't particularly very fast, as a few of the other rifles can beat this by a fraction of a second. Though putting 2 rounds back into the gun will be done at almost the same speed, with a fairly swift animation. A 3-bullet reload will combine the first and second animations, taking roughly an extra second, and reloading with 1 bullet left over will actually allow you to take out the remaining round and then perform a full reload by slotting in a new stripper clip, taking approximately 4.2 seconds to do, round about the same time as the Gewehr 98, which once again is about a whole second quicker than the Russian 1895. So these fairly snappy reload animations are going to allow you to generally replenish your ammo at a more consistent rate. So in conclusion, the Mosin-Nagant M91 is practically a slightly altered Russian 1895 rifle, trading a tiny bit of its fire rate over for some quicker, more reliable reloads. The gun's got a generally normal rate of fire, packing its biggest punch just outside those medium ranges, and the fact that it has one of the faster muzzle velocities in the scout class means that it should feel quite responsive to use, especially against enemies at closer to medium ranges, as you're not going to need to lead your target's movements quite as much as you would with some of the other rifles, such as the SMLE MKIII. Just like the Russian 1895, the Mosin-Nagant is a well-rounded weapon which doesn't really have any major flaws, though its sweet spot span isn't quite as large as some of the other longer range rifles like the Gewehr 98 and the M1903, which might make judging distances to land a one-hit kill a little bit harder to do. This isn't made any easier by the fact that you only have access to a maximum zoom level of 4 times magnification, so this is going to limit the weapon's long-range effectiveness slightly. And because the sweet spot zone is further out than a fair few of the other rifles, means that it's not exactly going to be the most dangerous gun to use in close to medium range gunfights either. The Mosin holds a fairly standard 5 rounds, which isn't really anything out of the ordinary, but because you can generally reload faster than most of the other scout rifles, the Russian 1895 in particularly, this is going to give you a slight advantage when you need to get those bullets back quickly, making you a less vulnerable target in the process. If you like using the Russian 1895, which doesn't actually have its own Marksman variant, then you're probably going to enjoy using the Mosin-Nagant M91. It's very similar in the way it performs, and it performs quite reliably over most distances. But anyway, that's pretty much it for another one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know it by leaving a thumbs up on your way out, and be sure to subscribe to see loads of other weapon guides for Battlefield 1 and other games too, right here on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in that next episode.